I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Stone Lake First Nations and Treaty 3 territory. I'll introduce the panel members. I'm Marcel Lorondo. I'm the chairperson. Ian McMahon.
Just man.
Ian McMahon. Oh, just McMahon. Kay Branson is the other panel member, and Merritt Frolick is the accessor today. Stephen Lund is our hearing secretary. There are no Zoom participants today, correct? So I don't have to read to them. All right, the form. We will be hearing applications for revision of assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Act. The matters for which revisions is requested have been described in each application. We will limit the discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons to assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision with respect to an application may be revealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of King's Bench, if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions and from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence of an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. We will be hearing items 5, 7, and 8 on the docket today. Mr. Lund, please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Merrick Frolick.
You affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Smith, please state your full name. Trevor Smith. You affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. Thank you. Be seated.
There, we're going to start at 830 King Edward. And you're ready to bring it forward?
Yep. File number is 22-229. Roll number is 07-02231-7000. Our initial assessed value was $8,892,000, and I have a recommendation from that. But I'll just quickly go over the property description. Properties on 830 King Edward Street in the northwest quadrant of the city of Winnipeg, with close proximity to the airport. We have five premises on the for this property and 2 different buildings. Currently, we have the effective year built as 1958. I think we're understating the effective year. I think it should be newer, but I haven't had the opportunity to do a thorough analysis yet. But I do feel that my recommendation that I've made here is very fair. We have the land area at 186,484. We have a leasable area of 85,899. So during the review process for this property, I did notice that there was a history of vacancy. So in situations when we have industrial properties that do not have a history of vacancy, we still give them market vacancy. So in this situation, with regards to the property, there is a history of vacancy over the past 5 years. I've made an adjustment to that where I've changed the allowance from 7% to 13, and that's with no other changes to the parameters. And my recommendation here today is for $8,009,000. I feel that's a fair value, and I'll leave it at that for now.
and 9. Are you going with the recommendation, Trevor?
I think we'll need to proceed through the
Okay.
material.
Anything else you want to put forward, Merrick?
No, I'll just continue on with my presentation. Just with regards to it, Mr. Smith and I had a conversation, and you could see in the verbiage that in 2020 we made a recommendation of 8.6 million of $6,860,000, and then it was going to go to the municipal board. Mr. Smith has advised me he's withdrawing the appeal at the municipal board, so I want to make the board of revision members mindful of that. And during the research for this property, I was able to look at some permits, and it looks like the vacancy issue will be resolved moving forward. But Mr. Smith could probably give us more information on that, because on the information that I pulled, one of the major tenants here are expanding their space, but I don't have the details on that.
If I can interrupt, we're now talking about the post-reference timeframe, so it's the assessment system is set up in such a way that all of that is captured for the next assessment cycle. So it's not relevant to.
Let's let Merrick finish his presentation. You can question him. Okay, Merrick, finish up.
And the only reason I mentioned that is because businesses have flows with regards to vacancy. Sometimes they're 100% occupied. Sometimes they experience blips in vacancy. I've tried to be mindful with my recommendation on the vacancy today. And while we talk about the market, the assessed value, the assessment, the reference date is April 1st, 2021. We also got to be mindful of the physical condition of the property as of January 1st, 2023. And there are significant permits being taking place, and that would subsequently increase the value of the property due to all the work that's been taking place. But I'd like to continue with my presentation if that is okay with the board members.
Please do.
Thank you. So the first reference that I have here on page 2 is with regards to the permit value. And there's not a lot of details, unfortunately, that I was able to get there, but essentially what it boils down to is there's interior renovations and occupancy to create storage space and office space for Gamma Dana Care for the adjacent vacant space within the warehouse. So Trevor has really good pictures of the space. That'll be mindful of it. I do not know if they're occupying the entire space or not, but there are some renovations taking place. And in fairness, the building looks to be in good conditions, and you'll be seeing that later on. The permit value declared is only $110,000, but I wasn't able to get any decent area information on the square footage. But they're creating office space. Work includes new diminishing wall and interior partitions and structural and mechanical work. On page 3 are some more details with regards to the work that's taking place for this property that is where the permits are taken out on March 16th, 2021. And you can see that on the side with regards to egress doors, electrical work, some alterations being taking place. But it's just an overview where they're adjusting the property for the expanded space for gamma ray. I'm looking at page 4 of my brief right now. So we've got some examples of with regards to the subject property pictures with what they have there. You have, like, I do believe we have, and let me double check here. We have we have Dana Care. We have MCAM Incorporated. We have Toke Breweries, and we have some Salumatics Incorporated. Those are the tenants that we had on the 2020 roll. You can see the location on the bottom portion of page 4, where it's on King Edward, right close to the airport between Wellington and Saskatchewan. And what I was able to provide here is some pictures of the subject property with regards to the leasable area. As you can see, this building's not a 1959 building that we have as an effective age here, which is one of the reasons why I feel that the rent that we're using is very fair, and the cap rates and the overall modeling for this. So that's on page 5. Page 6 shows some more pictures of the area that's going to be used eventually. And what I do have here is while I will acknowledge this, I put this recently, and usually I blank out the actual amount here. I blanked out the taxes and the count costs, but I forgot to take out the $750 and $1,050 annual rental rate that they're looking for this property. But when we look at the actual rents that are in the system, you know, I don't feel that I'm being unreasonable by including it there, because that's well within the range of the properties. In terms of features, accessible entry, excellent traffic exposure. They mentioned Dynacare and Torque Brewing location, high profile on King Edward and Wellington, minutes from the airport, recent upgrades, facade with metal clad roofing, insulation, HVAC equipment, large drive-in doors to convert loading dock with a floor drain, fully sprinklered, and they have the leasable areas at the time for 3,000 to 28,000 square feet. The owner has been compliant with regards to filling out income and expense mailers, and we appreciate that. If you look on, and I'm looking at page 8 right now, I don't know which portion of the building's owner occupied, because they mentioned that it's partial, but because nothing's explained on the mailer, but it does show that they are getting recoveries for this property, so it is a net rent. And the total leasable area is 86,167 that they have reported here, which is slightly higher than our model of 85,899. They are mindful of the vacancy issue here, and which is why I made the recommendation to change the vacancy rate from the 7% to the 13%. Looking at the actual mailer on page 9, you could see how they are getting recoveries with regards to the rents per se. The Dynacare rent that we have here is $10 that I have listed here. And then the next rent here, the MC, I do believe the next two rents are around the $9 ranges. And it just shows you the breakdown of the property here. So there are recoveries here. Sometimes with mailers, they mark down X's when they shouldn't. And so the total recoveries that I have listed here is at $4.06 that I was able to calculate. I'm now on page 10 on my brief. Is everyone on the same page?
Mhm.
Okay, excellent. So the overall view, so we got a variety of leasable areas in the building here, ranging from 1765 up to 37,175. And all of our rents are within the the $8 range, with a couple of them in the $9 for the smaller spaces. So on the $705,000, $798, our model rent is $8.22. We're using a 13% vacancy for the property because we're being mindful of the vacancy history of the building. We're using 3% for expense ratios and a shortfall of 385 to come up with the it's not shown on the screen here, but in my recommendation, the net operating income for the property now is 552,623. If you want to write that down. And there are no other changes to any of the other parameters. And that's how I came up with the $8,009,000.
Trevor, questions?
Oh, I still got a bit more there, Marcel.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So right now on page 11, and I'll expedite my process. So I'm showing a series of rents here on page 11. They're all in St. James, Barrie, Century. They're all in the neighborhood. The market rents here that I have here are showing a range between, between 750, and my highest one is at 975. They're all in the neighborhood, and there are various sizes. My sizes range from as low as 2,000 to 45,000. So that's why I feel comfortable with the market rents that we're using here. With regards to capitalization rates, we have the one-page summary on page 12, showing the range of type of cap rates that we've used for this. Our range for this property would probably be, the cap rate's the same with regards to a multi-tenanted building for the A or B. So we're using 6.9%. The industry standards from 5.55 to 7.45. And during the past 3 years, I've done a lot of work with regards to preparing for municipal boards. And cap rates are very subjective. And if you, when it comes to cap rates, methodologies change if the motivation is creating a lower assessment or developing a cap rate. And what I've shown here, and a great example of this is the argument with regards to excess of surplus land here. Usually at hearings, sometimes agents do not put any value to the excess of surplus land. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that wouldn't impact the cap rate. And what I have here is I'm showing an example of two different agents on the same property, which sold for $2.1 million. So the property here is on September 29th, 2020, actually almost 2 years to the date exactly. And it shows that the property sold on the bottom part for $2.1 million. And all this information is used in developing our cap rates that we used in creating the model. We can't present this information at these type of hearings because it doesn't allow it. However, in the past, when this property was on the appeal, the city of Winnipeg property where it was $5,557,000. The agent had used $475,000. He used the same vacancy rate as I have. He used the 7% expense ratio. We used a 2%. Shortfall was the same at 375, and our cap rates were nearly identical. Actually, the agent used a lower cap rate than I did, but in his overall valuation for this property was $1,556,000. Being mindful of the fact that this was a 2020 appeal, right? A 2020 appeal, and the reference date would be April 1st, 2018. However, in our perspective, you know, the property go up, you know, to $600,000. You know, it's, you know, to me, that's quite a bit. So maybe our assessment was too high at $1,932,000, but I don't think it was indicative of the $1,556,000 that the agent had used. In fairness to the agent, he did withdraw the 2020 municipal board appeal, and the 2023 value is $2,308,000. This property was not appealed at the municipal board for 2023. However, so in the cap rate study done by another applicant, they used a much higher rent than what's used than by the rent that was used at the appeal. So they used the 675 rent as opposed to a 475 rent. So that's pretty significant. Our vacancy was 6%. They used 4%. You know, and in their methodology, they came up with a net income of $192,276 based on the sale price. You know, the cap rate's 9.6%. So to me, you know, if they used the lower rent, the cap rate would have been lower, but they artificially put the rent higher, made the vacancy lower to increase the cap rate. So then and here's a summary of the two positions, you know. So similar to what I've already stated here, why do they use a 675 and a 4% vacancy? Well, here's how the numbers can be adjusted to support a position here. The appeal agent used the lower rent to derive a lower assessment, right? So for the agent's value here, they used 475 for the appeal, but for the cap rate, they used 675. For the vacancy allowance, they used 4%, 6% for the appeal. For the cap rate, they only used 4%. So what happens here, notice how there's a vast difference in the net income with all the other parameters being the same. 128 versus 192. So 128 is the net income used by the agent for the hearing, but the cap rate that was developed was 9.15% to come up with a $2.1 million sale. So I go through this exercise just to give an overview to the board members to realize all the details that end up taking place that we end up working on. And then on the next page, on page 18, I just shows the difference between how our assessed value worked out compared to what was done by the Altus cap rate in developing. And there's another example of the differences that we came up with. You know, we're showing how we used the only 375 shortfall and 2%, how they included the 5% here. But their rent was almost $1.25 higher than ours. Now we're going to look at on page 19, just the CBE reports from industry standards. So because a lot of people talk about COVID, and what I'm doing here is I'm just giving an overview of what's been taking place with regards to with COVID and how it's impacted the industrial rents here. So on the top of page 20, it just talks about rising industrial rents, improving feasibility of new construction. As tenants become acclimatized to the new highs in rental rates, expect to see more industrial construction in 2020 that will finally bridge the gap between existing inventory and much needed supply. With some renewal rates approaching $11 and new construction about $12, users are taking a harder look at the new developments and built to suit opportunities. Q1 on page 21, we're just showing the industrial cap rates used in 2021 from CB Richard Ellis. They have 5.75 to 6.5%. Winnipeg continues to see strong demand for warehousing and logistical assets in Q1 of 2021. Market has received renewed interest from institutional investors and growing appetite for larger acquisitions. On page 22 from Colliers, it also talks about the market outlook within the city of Winnipeg. There's some stats that are on 2023, on page 2023. And then on page 25, just an overview. And it just says, even though the industrial sector has not been 100% COVID proof, the performance of industrial assets showed resiliency in 2020. Industrial vacancy rate in Winnipeg in 2020 was 3.9% as opposed to 3.6% in 2018. Sublease options finished at 1.7% availability. Throughout 2020, industrial sector was driven by relatively stable fundamentals, accelerated demand for e-commerce, warehouse, and logistics. And in 2021, the accelerated pace of change as pre-existing trends have moved into new patterns, and warehouse and fulfillment continue to show growth in e-commerce, significant factors, as well as supply chain disruptions as companies respond to the challenges by holding more inventory. Some more stats with regards to vacancy showing a slight increase, and with regards to stats. So this property here would be in the northwest quadrant. We have the average rent here at $8.60, showing what the gross rents would be. And on page 27, if all the experts are stating the industrial sector has been resilient and robust, why would cap rates increase in their analysis, with rates going to 5.25% for some industry leaders? And here's an example of some of the cap rates that were used in 2018. All the cap rates shown here in 2018 used by another group are under 7%. But subsequently in 2023, the cap rates provided by another applicant shows much higher cap rates, where their ranges are from 7% to 9.15%. But in fairness to the other agents, some of them have been very within range with regards to some of the Class A and Class B categories. But the one thing I want to state here is when it comes to cap rates, they are very subjective. My final comment here is with regards to on page 29, land to building ratio. A lot of times agents will say, oh, we got to do an adjustment because the land to building ratio is too low. It's not suitable for this type of tenant. Well, like in this situation here, the land to building ratio is 2.17, and it's a flex warehouse. It's not a typical industrial warehouse site. So the 4-to-1 ratio is not even applicable. And even in some situations, a lot of industrial properties have ignored the 4-to-1 ratio that we've used. And so when I talk about this, like in a nutshell, I've given the slight verbiage here, but I got 3 examples of Sobeys, Burnaby Farms, and the former MLC location in Buffalo Place. Those are all examples where land to building ratios were not a deterrent in the expansion of the property. The important thing is access for being able to load and unload trucks. And a great example that I had earlier this year on 1781 Wellington Avenue for this property here, the land to building ratio was only 3.77%. And so very close to the 4. But if you, However, for the listing of the subject property, if you go through the property highlights, in the listing, it says excess land for future development. So even though it's not the 4-to-1 ratio, there's huge potential for development there. And if one looks at this property here on page 31, you can clearly see where the excess land is available for development, because that's the part that's been concreted out. And so if they did decide to expand at some point, there would still be more than enough room for potential tenants. That concludes my formal presentation, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Trevor, questions?
I might have a few. A lot of material to cover there. Yeah, so I guess I do have a couple of questions, obviously. So the permit issue that you brought up here on pages 2 and 3. So this is in regards to an existing tenant, the Gamma Dynacare, I believe is the name. That's right?
That would be my understanding, looking at the layouts that you provided us.
Okay.
And actually, if you look at the tenants at the list here, it's a numbered company, but the contact person is listed on the permit.
Right. So you'd also mentioned ownership, where it's partly owned. The ownership or partial ownership is connected with the Gamma Dynacare group themselves. Just wondering if the city was. That's my understanding from the property management.
Like I had stated when I did my presentation, there's conflicting information on the income and expense mailer provided by the owners.
Okay.
One aspect of it, they say it's owner occupied. However, they're showing all net leases here.
Right.
And the net leases that they're showing on the mailer seem to be reflective of market conditions.
So the Gamma Dynacare with the 3 properties here today, given workloads at the city, I'm going to assume that you haven't had a chance to inspect the spaces.
Well, I got really good pictures on the website, and I have been to Torque Brewing.
Okay.
And the space in Torque Brewing is very nice.
As have I.
So I don't know if I should mention that or not, if that's acceptable under this venue.
To visit.
But the Gamma Dynacare, where I'm going with this is Gamma Dynacare is office space, office space and kind of a medical production facility of a, I don't know what the terminology would be, of a highly clean nature. We're looking at declared construction value here of $110,000. That's probably not going to take you very far as building out additional office space, correct? So they're not looking at taking over the vacant space. They're merely expanding very slightly. Would that be accurate?
Well, I'm basing it on the information that I have here right now, which is why I was asking for you for guidance on this issue.
Yeah, and that's certainly fair. And I did speak with the owner a number of weeks ago, and after our most recent conversation, I wasn't able to get a call back prior to our hearing time here. But my understanding is that they're just expanding slightly.
Are you done with your questions now, Trevor?
No,
You're going into presentation.
I do apologize for that.
Back to your question.
Let's
Okay.
get back to questions. Absolutely. So let's move on. I did note a number of things here. So capitalization rates, and this is an interesting piece here. So page number 13, this is the sale of 100 McPhillips, which was Secor Jana. I don't know whether to ask this as questions or.
Be a question, or you can do it in your
Present
presentation.
it as rebuttal.
Yeah, it is. You might want to leave that for after. And
Okay.
if you know what the answer is going to be, don't ask the question, right?
Sorry, just bear with me for just a moment here. The issue of land area. So we're not the subject property has, as you've noted in yours, 2.17 land plan area ratio. That would be on the small side for on the lower end for industrial properties, would it not?
Yeah, but essentially this is a strip mall. Right, and then it's an industrial. It's packed as industrial. It's an industrial strip mall, and for parking, as long as they meet the parking requirements of the tenants and the ownership group, to me, land to building ratio is not an issue here.
Okay, page number 30, and this is simply looking at 1781 Wellington Avenue. So I'm not sure what the land plan area ratio on this particular property is.
Oh, it's on the first page, it's on the previous page, Trevor.
Okay.
The land to building ratio here is 377.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's right close to 4. And they're saying that there's probably actual development to actually expand it even more so. And looking at the picture on page 31,
yes,
I think where they have it as concrete, they could actually add more concrete in there and add another building in terms of the size there, like another third. Like in my eyes, they could easily add, a similar building to where the different roof lines are. Because if you go from west to east, the roofs are different.
Yeah.
They could probably do additional expansion where the concrete is and expand the parking lot and still have access.
So the 1781 Wellington, that's located on Route 90, correct?
Yes, it's very close to the airport. Just off of Route 90 on King Edward. And one side, yeah. And the other side is Barrie.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, do you have any questions?
Just one brief question for you, Mr. Froelich. You indicated that at page 10, you gave us the number 552,623. That's your total income approach. Is that down from where it's indicated 613,550?
Yes, and that's the adjustment that I made to vacancy from 7% to 13%, because there is a vacancy of this building here, and you never actually go to the actual vacancies. But, an evaluation process, I felt that the 13% was fair.
Understood. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, with respect to the access, the shipping access, I'm looking at the pictures on page 6, and I don't. That's an interior picture, of course, or interior pictures. Are those loading docks at the back of the warehouse? I don't see any pictures of the back of the warehouse. Exterior pictures of the back of the warehouse.
You know what? Just bear with me here for 1 sec here. So as you could see from the east looking to west for the Dynacare, there is one on the top portion of page 4.
Right.
There is a loading dock there. And just logistically speaking, let me just double check here. And I just want to. See, to me that, you know what, I think there are some loading docks back there, but it seems to be a tight space because on the picture that I have in front of me here right now, there are loading docks there in the back.
Yeah, that's what those are. Okay.
Yeah, there's because they're smaller. They're not massive ones. There's no ramps, but there are that I can see. But there are loading docks. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, loading docks for sure. And then if you see, there's the white portion that sticks out there. I'm not too sure if that's just like an extra storage space or what they have in that aspect of the building. But there are loading docks in the back.
Thank you. That's my question.
As far as the permit goes, is the permit closed?
You know what? I haven't, not as of this time.
Okay, that's good.
That I know of, because this permit was taken out in 2021, and with regards to resources and COVID, I don't have, I'm just, what, let me just quickly check one thing here, because that is an awesome question. And let's go here. And in our system here, we actually, it is closed.
Stuff online when.
Okay.
It is closed, Marcel.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna leave it at that. And we're gonna move on to you, Trevor, to make your presentation, please.
Okay, great. Just I'll need to clarify or clear up a few things, I guess, to start with here. Just looking at material from the assessment department. So I wasn't quite following the discussion regarding loading. So pictures on page number 5 of the assessor's brief, those are at the front of the building. It's you can see the stairs up to the metal landing there. That's along the vacant portion of the building along the front. So in the front of the L shape, not the rear. The asking rate on page 7, one can ask anything for space. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to achieve it.
Is this a rebuttal you're doing right now, or you're doing your presentation?
Somewhat rebuttal and somewhat presentation.
Okay, just I'd like to be able to follow it. So
Absolutely. So let's move on to page 13 with 100 McPhillips and the discussion regarding that particular sale and representation of the former owner and new owner, I gather. So I did represent the former owner of the property, which was Seaport Jana. They were an owner occupant of the building. When they sold it, they did sell it to another owner occupant. So it was 100% owner occupied previously, 100% owner occupied afterwards. There was no arm's length lease in place. It's not possible when you're an owner occupant. So to look at the discussion with regard to capitalization rate, our valuation of the property on page number 14, as shown, where we're at $4.75 a square foot, was supported by the material that we presented in our brief at the time, which was carefully selected, as it always is, to provide an appropriate rate, not the lowest possible rate for that property. It's an older property, wood roof, many issues with it, and the rate that we applied was appropriate to the property as it is. Subsequently, the property sold, and I gather that there's new representation with the new owner. I certainly didn't withdraw the 2020 municipal board appeal. It may be that it lapsed and the municipal board was unable to reach either the new or old owner, and it got withdrawn, but it was not withdrawn by myself. With regard to the other agencies' development of the capitalization rate for it on page number 16, which I imagine this is probably Altus just in looking at it. There was no lease in place in the building. You cannot develop a cap rate, a true market cap rate based on an inferred rent for the property. $675 wasn't any rent that was being paid there. the rate that they've applied to it. So you can't develop cap rates on properties that are owner occupied. The information is not there. So it's not a cap rate to be relied upon. So to suggest that we're looking to support higher cap rates and lower rental rates is, I would suggest, is not accurate. So that would carry forward, I believe, through page 17. That just summarizes the 2 points. Again, owner occupied property, we looked at the market and placed an appropriate rental rate on the property as it was. Let's see if that covers all the material that I felt I needed to comment on. Yeah, I think that covers my clarifications.
Mr. Chairperson, can I ask one question though?
You can, now that he's done a rebuttal, yes.
Okay, my question is did you state, and maybe I misheard this, did you state that we went to your value in the 2020 appeal for the subject property, for the property listed on page 14?
No, I didn't state that.
Okay, and so, okay, I thought I had heard that. Okay, just double checking, because if you look at the next page here on page 15, I see the value cut to 1,634,000. And so just so I could clarify, because like, and I understand the circumstances here with regards to it. So would it seem unreasonable for the people who appealed this property at the time to be seeking an increase? Because if it was cut to 1,634,000 and you're asking for 1,056,000, so just doing the math here, it's 46, say 40, say about $75,000. Is it normal practice for an agent to appeal a property at the municipal board when there's only a $75,000 difference between what the ask was and what the decision was?
Well, I'm not going to comment on what normal practice is. I can say that in the last cycle, there was a significant issue with regard to non-recoverable expenses, and in circumstances where the board was not in agreement with our position with regard to non-recoverable expenses. We felt that it was important to ensure that taxpayer was not penalized by not getting the same decision that others were. So if it's a small amount, it certainly could have been that particular issue. I don't recall the details. And I don't.
No other questions.
On with your presentation, please, Trevor.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 830 King Edward Street. Let's have a quick look at this. So cover page shows you frontage of the property from the side street. You can see Dining Care on the southernmost portion. In the white bit of the building there, as I said, they are an office space / medical research facility, essentially. I gather they're looking at a small expansion of their area. Again, I don't have any information on any size of expansion that will be in the future. It's not been done to date. And obviously, the way our assessment system is set up, after the valuation date, anything after that is then captured in the next assessment cycle. So that's where it's appropriate for these things to be captured to ensure the city receives fair compensation on the value of the property. So let's look at my presentation here. Page number 3 gives you some background. We're looking at 2023 assessment of $8,892,000. As the assessor had mentioned, we did look at the 2020 assessment appeal to the municipal board, and we are in conversation with the owner with regard to a withdrawal of that appeal for different reasons. We are looking at the property with fresh eyes here, and there are other factors that come into play. So that's what I would state for you there. Original property was built in 1958, sits on 4.3 acres, land plan area ratio of 2.18. Now, for the subject property is, as Merrick had mentioned, yeah, there's adequate parking out front. That's not an issue for the tenants that are there. What is an issue and is part of the land plan area ratio at such a low ratio is loading for the vacant space. And what I will do, well, let's run through the text at the bottom of page 3 just quickly here. So again, built in 58, just under 86,000 square feet. The main section of the building, 77,000 square feet roughly, is elevated above grade level. You can see that clearly from the city's photos on the frontage where you have that elevated stairwell and landing. The loading for dining care is on the west side of the building, off of the roadway itself. And then there is grade level loading for Torque, etc. Torque has yes, that they have some loading, I believe, on the side of the building as well, off of the side roadway. Our main issue, let's flip to page 4 here, is a vacant unit that has been vacant for roughly a decade, with some small intermittent month-to-month tenancies, is loading. So the King Edward Street's on the east side, obviously. Berry Street is on the west. So the rear of the property is on the north side. So the top end of that page number 4 is where the loading would be for that vacant unit. Now, if you look at the vacant unit, it's roughly 37,000 square feet. Very significant portion of the building. Well, I'll come up with the actual square footage in a moment when we get there, but the loading is off of a very narrow gravel surface rear laneway. Picture your back lane at home, it's about that wide. Then there is a slight additional half a lane of space before you have dock level loading that's flush with the building. So it's actually built into the wall. The reason for that is it was formerly a railway, and the loading, property being built in 58, loading was from the railway at the rear. Goods were taken off of the rail cars and brought into the property from the rear of the property. Now, in modern day, that really doesn't work, and the loading is very inadequate. Even for certainly semi-trailers have no opportunity whatsoever to back in there and load. It's a very significant space. So anybody taking a space of that size would require access for semi-trailers to unload and load. And smaller cube trucks would have a challenge loading in that rear laneway as well. So we'll hopefully get to a photo of that in a moment. Photos of the exterior on page 5, as well as page 6. So bottom of page 6 does actually give you a slight view of that rear gravel laneway. You can't see it, but there's a fence that's very close on the left-hand side of that photo. So the trucks would have to come off of Berry into that laneway and then somehow back up to the dock level loading that's flush with the building in order to unload. It's simply not possible. So they're left with this space that's oversized and has loading that simply doesn't work for a space of that size. So let's get to the inside. Page number 7 is photo of the interior, the vacancy. You can see it's wide open. That we're looking at wood deck roofing there. Some of the loading on the west side for Dynacare is shown for page 7. Torque Brewing, page 8. And then we have some of the Dynacare space at the top of page 9, as well as storage at the bottom of page 9. I think page 10 is also Dynacare as well. So his site is shown on page 11. If you look at the top of the building, you can see the very narrowness of that laneway and again, the impossibility of getting good loading for that particular unit, which is the major challenge in leasing it. So let's move forward to the valuation itself. The subject property leases are shown on page 15. We have 4 of the units leased, 9, 9, 10, and 1075 are the lease rates. Again, we have owner occupancy in one of the units, as well as a higher level of finish, obviously, for office medical development company. We're not disputing the $9 and $10 rates. What we are looking at is what's an appropriate rate for that vacant space. So the discussion of that will come in a moment here. Actually, let's have that first. Vacancy and collection loss. So the subject property has 31,362 square feet of vacant space, 36.5% vacant. Vacant unit has been vacant since 2010 with continuous professional marketing over that time period. 2010 to 2017, it was Remax Commercial. 2017 onwards, it was Davis & Young and Rousewell Realty. Property's also been listed on the Winnipeg Real Estate Board system by the property manager, as well as having the vacant listing information provided to all commercial brokerages in the city. The only thing that they've got during that time frame are short-term, month-to-month storage type tenancies. So kind of a stopgap, bring in some minimal income type of tenancies is my understanding of what they have been able to achieve in that time. No lease of the entire space has been forthcoming, and so they've had this chronic vacancy, 36.5% of the building, for more than a decade. I've already talked about the issues with leasing the space. Obviously, with good representation from different companies over that amount of time, you would think that it would lease up. It's in everybody's interest, obviously. So the vacancy is chronic. It's because of the issues with the space. And that leads to what should it lease for? So page number 6 is our rental comparable study. We have units of similar size, certainly similar utility. Some of them are superior to the subject, and as much as possible, we try to keep them in the same area and as recent in time as possible. So we have Homans Creek at $6.25 a square foot, built in 1980, 26-foot wall height.
You said page 6?
Sorry, page number 15.
Yeah, that's
Apologies.
You had me going back and I went, hold it.
I misled you.
Yeah. And carry on, sorry.
My apologies. 25 Paquin is in St. Boniface. Much newer structure. 2017 lease at $6 a square foot for 45,000 square feet. 1,000 King Edward close by. 2020 lease for 41,000 square feet, $5.60. Similar age in 1960. 955 Lage. 2018 lease, 35,000 square feet, 550, built in 1965, good access, visibility, etc. on Lagimoje. 895 Century in the same area as the subject. $6 lease for 30,000 square feet, newer building in 88. 199 Omens, 2021, $6.40. Very recent lease. For somewhat smaller space, 21,993 Century, $4.60 a square foot in 2020. So these are leases of a similar size, very similar utility, probably superior in loading for all of them, I would estimate to say. And we've arranged from 460, admittedly on the low end, but dominantly between 550 and call it 650. We feel that $6 a square foot net is more than appropriate for the vacant space, and we're not disputing the existing rents that are in place. Let's move forward to vacancy on page 16. So again, buildings had chronic vacancy of 36.5% for more than a decade. The market stats are shown there. They're not applicable to the subject. If you were to look at this property as an investor as of the valuation date, and you had various commercial brokerages unable to lease this space over the span of a decade, you would realize that you have an issue here, and you would compensate accordingly. So the vacancy that we've applied in our analysis is 20%, which is lower than the maximum allowed by the city, which is 25% for buildings that have chronic vacancy. Our expense allowance, I'll save everybody time. Certainly you've heard it from me before. I'm not going to go through our argument on the expense allowance unless you'd like to
Touch on it.
All right, we'll touch on it briefly. So the issue with expense allowance, the city of Winnipeg formerly had in all assessment cycles up to the 2020 assessment, they had a overall 7% expense allowance. This was comprised of what was termed a 5% management expense, as well as a 2% other, which was reflective of structural allowance for the subject. Now, in 2020 and into 2023, they've reduced this from 7% overall to 2% in 2020 and 3% in the 2023 assessment cycle. Now, what this ignores is standard appraisal and assessment methodology where non-recoverable expenses do need to be included in the development of net operating income. So I provide the text with regard to the theory from the Appraisal Institute of Canada on page 16. I demonstrate how the net operating income is arrived at, where non-recoverable expenses are to be deducted. And then we show the asset classes the components of the non-recoverable expenses, the line items that fall within that should be deducted from the net operating income. Now, this is where the dispute comes in between the city and owners and the market in general, agents. The categories that we've listed here are all acknowledged in appraisal theory as being non-recoverable expenses that need to be deducted from the net operating income. In the last cycle, I conducted a study, a 3-year review of properties to determine what non-recoverable expenses amounted to. Pardon me. This is summarized on page 17. We reviewed between 45 and 53 properties. And under two methodologies, one with no TI and one with TI included, we determined that on a 3-year average, non-recoverable expenses amounted to 11.5%, with no TI and 12.7% with TI included. Now, these amounts are obviously higher than the 7% that was allowed. We're simply asking for the reinstitution of that initial 7% allowance in the city's model. Shortfall allowance, we're not in dispute on, and we can move forward to the capitalization rate. I'm not going to touch on it here as we're in agreement with the 6.9% rate, roughly, that the city has applied for the subject. Our summary is on page number 18, where our valuation is compared to the city's 2023 model as well as the 2020 model on the right-hand side. So our final value for the subject property, based on the parameters provided, is $6,747,000. The addenda includes the income and expense questionnaire, as well as the decision from the last cycle. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Mayor, questions?
So just to confirm, so have industrial market values gone down or gone up in the past 3 years? As a general overview.
I don't know that I discussed that in my information that was provided, but on a general level, yes, I would say that certainly for segments of the industrial market, such as distribution, et cetera, there's been strong demand, but it's very dependent on the property, obviously. So,
okay. The reason why I asked that is you withdrew a 2020 PO at $6,860,000, and you've come to the realization that that these rents are net, yet you're asking for a value which is lower at $6,747,000.
Well, there's a number of aspects to that, I guess. I'm in discussions with the owner to withdraw the 2020 appeal, as we had discussed, which I gather will go forward likely. The valuation that we had for 2020 was not $6,860,000. That was the recommendation of the City of Winnipeg assessor, and it was accepted by the board. So we're not basing our value on what the 2020 reduced assessment was.
You've mentioned a large history of vacancy for the subject property, and I've acknowledged that in my recommendation. Do you have any examples of any advertisements where they're asking for $6 a square foot rent for the subject property?
No, I didn't. It's not that I don't have flyers from the various brokerages that handled the property, and I'm not suggesting that they asked $6. I don't actually know what they asked. What I did is look at the market and determine an appropriate rent based on leases of a similar size and location as close to the valuation date as possible.
Okay, but do you think if they did offer $6 as a market rent, because the evidence in my brief saying that the bottom line was $750 to $1050, if they did offer a $6 rent, would the vacancy be as high?
I think they would have challenges in filling that space. I think $6 is appropriate. And $750 to $10 is not a baseline, it's an asking rent, and asking rents, you can ask whatever you wish.
But the $6 would be at the low end of the scale if you used it compared to my comparables. Is that a fair assessment to make? Because there's a vast difference between your comparables and my comparables. and they're all in the same region, minus the ones that you've included on Lagimodier and at Murray Industrial Park.
Well, yes, and again, we're not disputing the rents that are in place for the subject properties where they have appropriate loading, et cetera. The dispute is with regard to the vacant unit. So the rents that we provided are with respect to that particular unit.
So on page 4 of your brief, just so I understand this process a bit better in terms of layouts and everything like that. If we look at if we go to the west of Torque Breweries, because in the listing they had said that there's potential for smaller developmental space, like 3,000 square feet. What would be the difference between the access points and the rental rates between Torque and maybe the eastern portion of the building on page 4, which is currently vacated?
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand the question. So what?
Could you look at page 4 on your brief?
I'm on page 4, yep.
Okay, so what happens here is we're looking at the footprint of Torque Breweries, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of the issues that you're saying here, is there a vast difference in the quality of the space from Torque if we just went immediately west to the subject property? Because there's 2 separate doors that are listed on your brief. So wouldn't that side have potential for development? Because in terms of all the issues that you had mentioned, because I don't see much difference in the Torque space and the rest of the building here in terms of other developmental potential.
So that's a good question. So if we look at page 4 there, if you look at the rear of Torque, the only reason that Torque was able to go into this building from a loading access point of view is that they provided an angled rear dock level loading bay for them off of the rear laneway. So if you look at top of page 4, you can see that little bump out. That is the angled loading for them. What precludes them from doing that on the other spaces is that if you were to put any other ones along that vacant space, you would then not be able to access the Torque brewing loading on the west end of the building. So
they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different doors that they can do that to.
I'm sorry?
There are like potentially 5 different doors, you know what I mean? Like there's, you know what, that's fine. No other questions, thank you.
Okay, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Ian?
No, thank you.
And I think I'm good. Yes, I am. That concludes that matter. Let's move on to item number 7, and which will be 55 Furniture Park. I think we're going to take a short break. We'll call the meeting back to order. Merrick, when you're ready, we'll be dealing with 55 Furniture Park. Right?
Yes, give me 1 sec here. File number is 22-220. Roll number is 0400287200. First property we're looking at is 125 Furniture Park.
55.
That's what he said.
Well, they said 125.
Oh, what? Oh, you said 1. I'm sorry.
I think we're starting at 55. I may have misheard that. I apologize.
So he did say 125. You're right.
Okay.
We're dealing with 55.
What am I doing, guys?
5.
125?
5.
Okay.
5.
Thank you. Okay, just looking for leadership. Just looking for leadership.
I'm mumbling here or something.
Yeah. So for 55 Furniture Park, The assessed value that we have for this property is $12,260,000.
Did you read the information on 55 or did you read it on for 125?
I did 55.
Okay, good.
So I can read it again for the record if you wish.
Let's do it just so we don't confuse anything.
Okay. For 55 Furniture Park, I have file number 22-220. The roll number is 0400287200.
Thank you.
For the subject property, we have assessed value of $12,260,000. Before I go through my formal presentation, I want to go through full disclosure here. In 1996, I had worked for Palliser Furniture for 6 years, from 2006 to 2002. At that time, it was under the Palliser Furniture window, and the two buildings were interconnected. 125 and 55 were interconnected, and they had access to the entire building. Their entire manufacturing process consisted of both sides. Since that period of time, there have been two separate roll numbers. But when we go through the presentation today, they will be sort of intermingling a bit, because at one point they were one roll number totally. So I just want to make sure that the board members understand that. What we have here, there's like 16 different buildings that have built during various stages. 1 to 2 story buildings. On the second floor aspects of these buildings, it is office space, which I know because I used to work in those office spaces. Effective age is between 1963 and 1986, and ceiling heights are between 14 and 25 feet. Zoning's M2 general manufacturing. The land area is 378,284, and the leasable area that we have here is 253,422, with a land to building ratio of 1.72. We're asking for the value to be confirmed today because there are municipal boards on this property for 2018 and 2020. Going through the brief here, and I just want to double check. Going through the brief here. So what they've provided here for they have been compliant with regards to income expense mailer information, but some of the data has been a bit limited here because they're only showing a leasable area of 10,240 square feet here. And the total income is 12,150. But like I stated before, a lot of this property is owner occupied. What is interesting with regards to this property though, on the mailer, they're only showing 10,240 square feet, but we actually have BA for 2 other businesses located on here, and they haven't shared that information with us. For example, Alliance Store have been tenants in this building from a business assessment perspective since 2013, yet the ownership group has not provided us any leasable information with regards to this. And the reason why this is important is because this is just not one unit per se. There's 2 different areas that are separated that have a 12,000 square foot area, which is the Salvation Army. And the other area is 46,000 square feet. And none of that information is provided on the mailer. So when the sales transfer took place in 2004, on the bottom of page 3, it was $4.2 million. And I believe at the time, that's when these properties were separated. So on page number 4, shows you a picture of the head office area for Palliser Furniture at the time, giving you a description, 55 Furniture Park. The building size for that aspect is 10,127. Nice newly finished office space with large private offices, furnished boardroom equipped with built-in furniture. The building's located in Furniture Park between Springfield Road and McLeod, and it's in the north quadrant of the city. And at the time, I do believe Art Affairs office was in this building when I was working there. There's some additional pictures on page 5, and on the bottom of page 5, that shows you the general outlook of where it's located at with regards to Chief Peguis Trail and La Jamodier to the east of the subject property. Page 6 shows some additional pictures. So what we have here, 55 Furniture Park is like right in the middle, and then 125 Furniture Park will be to the east of it. That's on page 6. Page 7. So what we have for leases here. So because of all the different, because this building has been split up in recent time, I had referenced the two different areas, 12,000 square feet and 46,000 square feet. And we have model rents for these areas of $657 and $515. And what's also significant is you'll notice a big difference in the rental rate for $3.65 at the 186, $658. So based on the information that we have here, we know we have business assessment on the roll number for 12,000 and 446. Smaller spaces get higher rents. And so subsequently, there's such a difference between what we have here. And so, but unfortunately, we don't know what the actual leases are in place for Alliance and the Salvation Army because they haven't shared that with us. So that's important consideration that needs to be looked at when we're looking at the valuation for this property. Going through the math here, so the total leasable area is 253,422. We come up with effective gross income of $1,009,751. Using our 3% and our shortfall, we come up with a net operating income of $950,188. Using a cap rate of 7.75%, we come up with a value of $12,260,000. If we look at my comparables on page 8 and 9, my first group of comparables, they're ranging in rents between a low of $381 to a high of $896. So the rental rate on 381, the 1970s building at $3.81, shows you with 22 wall feet of 22 feet. And then subsequently, we have the high of the brand new Amazon, which is $9. We're not asking for $9. We're not asking for a higher rent. So our model rent for the larger space is $365. So based on that information here and up-to-date information, which is as close to the reference date as possible, and I do think, I didn't research that, so I do apologize. But what we have here is all of our leases, most of our leases here are more recent, right? And then subsequently on page 9, you're looking at smaller spaces. And so the $3.65 that we're using, that's for the large space. So to state that we should use a lower rental rate for the entire building would be false, because there's two separate areas there, two different businesses that are operating and functioning, and the market would say that their rental rates would be much higher than the $365 that we have, which is why we're in that $6 range. And here's some rents to support that. They're all in the Northeast quadrant, and their range is from $425 to $1145. We've discussed cap rate information in the past. I have some additional information that will be presented on the next property, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Questions, Trevor?
Yes, just briefly. So for the main leasable area that you have for the subject, the city's using a net rent of $365 a square foot.
That's what we're using, yes.
Okay. And in looking at the city's valuation model from 2020 versus 2023, cities dropped the cap rate by a full percentage point from 8.75 to 7.75. Can you expand on that?
I wasn't the assessor for that property in 2020, so I can't expand upon that. Cannot.
That's fair. And then just looking at the leases on page number 8. So you've stated, of course, that 1001 Regent is new build Amazon, as you'd stated, I guess, right? So we're not really looking at that one.
No, but what that shows you is that our model rent of $365 is very fair, because if a brand new building is renting at almost $9, our market rent of $365 for a similar space, for not a similar space, but a similar size of space. Size is an issue. Tells me that our model rent's very fair.
Okay, I'll just, I guess I got a couple quick questions here on these, because I believe these are the same rental rates that are in 125 furniture as well.
That's correct, yeah.
So we'll just do this once then. 1750 Inkster Industrial Park. It has an excellent 12 bay dock level loading court on the front of the building. Excellent trucking access. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And generally superior wall height at 22 feet for the whole building.
Well, the point is, for the subject property, our wall heat in spaces is 25 feet. So actually the subject property has a higher wall height than the comparable that you're speaking of.
I'll get into that in my presentation then. So second one, 51 Burmac, this is a lease back and shouldn't be included.
No, but my view with regards to lease backs, and so, you know, usually there's an adjustment that takes place, maybe 10 to 15% with a lease back or a built to suit situation. And for my opinion, so even if we cut that by 10% or by 15%, if you're reducing the rent to $550, then all of a sudden $550 of a market rent for a 1976 building with a wall height of only 14 feet tells me that we're really, really fair with the rent that we're using.
Okay, but I guess my overall question is that leasebacks drive higher rental rates, correct?
But if you make the adjustment for that, which I've answered to, of 10 to 15%, we're still at a rental rate of $5.50.
Okay.
Which is significant, which is a building which doesn't have the same ceiling height, which is in a similar sort of age range.
Okay, 10 Hutchings, also Inkster Industrial Park, excellent 13 bay dock level loading, good truck access, high ceiling height in comparison to the subject.
Well, the point is that the Palliser furniture, if I'm just going off the top of my head, and because if I remember, if you're looking at the two aspects of the building together, you know, there are, and you would know this better than I would, Trevor, and I'm basing this on memory. I would say there's at least 6 loading docks at the 55 Furniture Park. If you're comparing what's on the west side of the building, which is where the Lion store is and where the Salvation Army is. And then I do believe they have some that's offloading off Burnett as well. But maybe, you know what, let me double check, because on Burnett, you know, I'm speaking out of turn here, because no, you're right. On the for 55, they only have access that I could see, but unless, you know what, I'd have to double check. You know what, I haven't done an inspection of this, so I'm just basing it on memory. So you know what, I know there is rental rate areas, access points with the Lion stores on Gateway, but it may not have many doors with regards to your question. But in response to your question, Trevor, the rental rate for 10 Hutchings is $5.72 on 147 square feet, and our model rent is $3.65 for the larger space, not the smaller one. So once again, I'm very comfortable with the rent that we're using here right now.
Okay, let's move on to 1755 Dugald then. I've done work for this property owner. It's all fab. This would be a non-arm's length internal rental rate then?
We're only as good as the information that is provided to us by the owner. If they're calling it a net rent, then we have to have faith in what they provide us.
Absolutely, and I understand that. Having been involved with the property, that one is an internal lease, just so you can mark that one down. 861 McLeod, again, that's an internal rent, book rent, as you noted, for Woodland Supply.
If I didn't write it down, I wouldn't have. I'm not trying to withhold any information from either yourself or the panel members.
And I'm not accusing you of doing so. Just that is an internal rent, correct?
That is a book. When I did the follow up for the property owner, I'd asked him, how did you come up with the rent that they'd used for that? And he said, we felt that was what the market conditions were indicative of. And so that's what they did. Similar to when we have vacant space, and for a lot of mailers, they'll have vacant space reflective of the building. So in my past with the office buildings like OFBs, they'd have the ticketed rent of $13 or $14, you know, and then with industrial properties, looking at the other quality of the buildings here, like similar to this one here, a lot of times, like on 830 King Edward, they wouldn't use an artificially low $6 rent. They would take a ticketed rent or a book rent closer to the actual rents of all the other properties.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Hey, any questions? None?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
With respect to cap rates, I'm looking at page 10 of your brief. The city doesn't seem to distinguish between A and B, but some of the other companies do. Is there any significance between whether this is categorized as industrial A or industrial B?
Well, usually industrial type A properties would be newer buildings, higher ceiling heights.
Okay.
Right. But the point is, what the key important that you got to realize about cap rates, and this comes into with regards to the argument that's made by agents with regards to non-recoverable expenses. 65% of the properties industrial are owner occupied. They don't have the leasing commissions and the tenant incentives and all the aspects they make reference to. Like if you're dealing with office properties or retail properties, I understand a little bit, but for industrial properties, if you take away 65% of the properties out of it, we're creating a model based on what we have out there, and we're trying to be fair, consistent, and equitable with our methodologies. So it's hard to develop a true cap rate. So we base our cap rates on the information that we extract from the mailers, and then we look at what the industry leaders say.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Trevor, on with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So property we're dealing with here is 55 Furniture Park. As Mr. Frolik had stated, it's actually really what we're dealing with is 55 and 125 Furniture Park as a whole. I'll get into that in a moment. If you look at the cover page of my brief, this is an aerial of the property. It's not outlined in red or anything, but it's in the middle of the page, not the top. And so on your right-hand side is Gateway, and Furniture Park is the roadway that kind of cuts directly east to west across the middle of that photo. So to the north, towards the bottom end of the photo, is 55 Furniture, which runs close to the edge of the photograph on the west-hand side, where 125 Furniture, pardon me, begins. So that is the orientation of it. From the photo, you can see that it takes up the vast majority of the site. Let's move into the brief itself. So looking at the page number 3, we have a summary of some details for the property. The 2023 assessment is $12,260,000. This is a $4,460,000 increase, 57%. This is not reflected in the marketplace. There may have been some lift in distribution properties, et cetera, in industrial in recent times, but properties such as the Subject, where we have 248,000+ square feet of leasable area adjoined legally to another property of roughly the same size. So in the neighborhood of 500,000 square feet, not the same animal. with the challenges that we'll discuss as we go forward here. So 2020 assessment, subject property was reduced to 7.8 million. The decision from this is included in the addenda of my material. This was a recommendation by the city of Winnipeg at 7.8 million and was accepted by the Board of Revision at that time. We do have that under appeal at the municipal board, but that 7.8 million was a recommendation from the city. Our valuation for the property for 2023 is 9,178,000. You can see the history of appeals for the property stretching back to 2011 and the orderly progression. We're jumping from 7.8 to 9,178 based on our valuation. So let's get into the text, page number 3. Subject property is a large-scale industrial manufacturing building developed as a facility for manufacturing furniture. So a bit of background, originally there was Palliser as the whole company on both sides of Furniture Park Roadway. There was a division of companies back in the 2000s at some point, and 55 Furniture and 125 Furniture became owned by a holding company for DeFair Furniture. So Palliser is on the other side with the more recent buildings. This was the original one that was developed. Pardon me. Page number 3, again, text at the bottom. Built between 1963 and 1986, sitting on 8.7 acres, and we have a land to plan area ratio of 1.52 to 1, which is very small. And we'll get into the issues that creates for the ownership or any potential tenancies. So sorry. No worries. So the subject property forms part of a larger complex of 2 buildings, as noted. 125 is adjoined internally connected to 55 Furniture Park. So the 2 buildings were developed for use by the owner occupant for use as a single manufacturing facility, with the production workflow traveling between the 2 parts of the complex. As a legal entity, a single legal title encompasses both portions of the property, and portions of the property could not be sold individually without a legal subdivision of the property. According to the Municipal Assessment Act, I'm not going to run through this in detail here, but according to the Assessment Act, accessible property is noted as stated there. Under the same section, real property is as stated there. Land and improvements on the land includes an interest in land or an improvement, air, surface, or subsurface rights as respect to land. Under a single legal title, the fee simple ownership covers the whole property. So if we look beyond that on page number 4, under part 3, administration, section 13.1, amending assessment rules, where in a year for which general assessment under subsection is not required, assessment rules can be revised by an error or reason of an error or omission in assessment roll entry, subdivision of the land, or consolidation of a parcel or parcels of land. Following that, we have City of Winnipeg Charter Act has the following definition of parcel. Parcel means the total of all contiguous land described in a single certificate of title. So I have put the roll numbers in there. They are on a single title. The reason for all of that text is that we have a single accessible property that is divided into 2 portions and assessed differently. So what we're really looking at is the combined size of these 2 buildings, which I believe I state somewhere here, is in the neighborhood of 500,000 square feet. The subject property itself being roughly half of that size. As this is how they're currently assessed, we're proceeding with the appeals on this basis. It hasn't been corrected despite being pointed out in the past to prior assessors. And so we need to proceed with the appeal on this basis. But really what we're assessing in a legal fashion is the adjoined two buildings on a single title, which comprise, again, in the neighborhood of 500,000 square feet. Let's move on to description. We have text beginning on page 11, but photos beginning on page 5. So building was built in stages. So there's 16 individual buildings essentially that are adjoined. As Palliser grew and expanded, they would add on another building to accommodate their needs at that time. And subsequently, you end up with a building that has lots of individual buildings adjoined with demising walls, etc. Pardon me. This is all stated on page 11, which we'll get to. Photos of the property begin on page 5. Exterior from Furniture Park Roadway at the top of page 5. One of the interior of 55 Furniture at the bottom. Moving on to page 6, typical of much of that space, the low ceiling height, wood deck roofing, and you can see the furniture production facility as it sits there in that space on 6 and 7. Moving on, more photos of the interior on 8 and 9. Again, take note of the ceiling heights. And then we get into the office area of property on page 10, relatively small portion. It is the 2-story section of the building. And they have a cafeteria for their workers, as well as office space for the property itself. As you can see, it's a bit vintage. It's certainly not modern finishes for an office space. Is it functional? Yes, it is. So building improvements, page number 11, built between 1963 and 1986. We have 248,927 square feet based on the information from the City of Winnipeg assessment records. This excludes a basement area of 1,372 square feet. We deal with this every cycle. It's not an accessible area. I've described it to other assessors in the past, but it doesn't get removed. So that is why you'll see that our area is slightly different than the city's. 2010.
What area was that again, Trevor? Sorry.
Pardon me?
What area is that again?
It is a basement area of 1,372 square feet. That
Do you have a picture of it?
I don't have a picture of it. No, it's been described numerous times. In the 2010-11 cycle, it was going to be. It was in the agreement. It was reduced to the area that we described for the property. It's not huge, but it is there. When we combine subject property as it should be with 125 Furniture Park, we're looking at nearly 464,000 square feet almost. Building built in stages has a variety of sections with demising walls, resulting in less than optimal layout from a functional standpoint for industrial production. A lot of functional obsolescence, obviously. This would not be ideal for the majority of tenants. Now, total of 97,000+ square feet has an exterior wall height of 16 feet or under, which comprises 39.2% of the building. Then we have a total of 219,000+ square feet, or 88% of the building, which was constructed prior to 1979. 52.4%, which was constructed before 1974. So it's an older property dominantly. The description is shown on page 11. You can read through that if you wish. We've seen the photos. And then we have the individual building sections laid out at the bottom of the page. So older building with significant sections of it being a lower ceiling height. There are portions that are larger, but it's not a 25-foot ceiling height across the board by any means. Site description, page number 12, 1.52 to 1 land to plan area ratio, which is particularly low for the subject property. This is important. It very much limits loading for the majority of the building. If you look at the photos on page number 12, you can see Furniture Park roadway running east-west there, and the access to the subject property on the north side is off of Furniture Park. So you have a challenging loading situation, both in terms of location of those doors and access, as well as any on-site loading and staging capacity. So you can't, very limited on-site storage for trailers or anything of that nature. And of course, parking is severely restricted. They have a significant parking issue for this property. Property location, page number 13. It's located off of Gateway in East Kildonan there in a small section of industrial centered on Furniture Park itself because of Palliser originally. And obviously, in terms of trucking location, we're not located on one of the main trucking corridors, etc. So it's a bit more convoluted to get to and not ideal from most tenants' points of view in terms of location. Let's move on to the valuation, page 15. Before we get into the individual valuation components, we do have a bit of text that we have to run through quickly here. So we're looking at a property itself that is 248,000 plus square feet in a leasable area. This is one of the larger buildings in the city when you combine it, as it should be, with neighboring 125 furniture at 463,000 square feet. It is one of very few buildings of that size in the city. Most properties of that size are owner occupied. So there are no rents of 500,000 square feet, 400,000 square feet out there for us to look at. Needless to say, economies of scale come into play when you get into sizes of that range. So let's look at my page number 15. Given the fact that we have a large single tenant industrial property, very large, over large for the city, there are certain components we need to look at. So I point those out. The city's assessment department uses a mass appraisal evaluation based on income approach. It doesn't necessarily address the issues that are applicable to properties such as this property. So let's look at those factors. Middle of the page 15, characteristics of large single tenant that bear consideration and valuation, size and function. Number 2, properties often developed specifically for that occupant's needs. Being owner occupant leads to situations such as the subject, where the property is generally very choppy, lots of demising. Layout is not ideal for vast majority of tenants. And again, we're not looking at small sections of the building, we're looking at 248,000 square feet. And then usually we have limited arm's length rental potential based starting on the size of the property and the limited number of tenants that would be out there and that then would want this particular property over something more modern and with greater utility. There's more text with regard to this issue, bottom of page 15, size and function. Itself classifies the property as special purpose and narrows the number of potential purchasers and lessees. Functional obsolescence, already discussed this, the layout, leads to less than optimal material flow patterns, etc., which again is not conducive to the vast majority of tenants. And then limited rental potential. Again, just given the size, there are exceptionally few tenants that would come along of this size that would look at leasing a property such as this. When you get into a situation of looking at potentially demising it, etc., then you're changing the building and changing the valuation. That's not what we're valuing today. What we have is 248,000 square feet or 463,000 square feet, not small portions thereof that would require significant investment. Further discussion on page 15. I will not run through each of these points, although I'm happy to elaborate on them if you wish. Again, converting the building to multi-tenant is a very costly operation where typically you need an experienced operator to do that successfully. Let's move into the valuation. So we are looking for the best comparables possible, obviously large in size. As mentioned, we're not going to find leases of 400,000 and 500,000 square feet, very, very few of 200,000. So what we provided is the best possible information on leases of a great size that are as comparable as possible to the subject property. So let's run through these quickly. They're the same in 125, so I'll spend a little bit of time on this. First one is 1821 Wellington. This is the former Sears warehouse by close to the airport. 146,000 square foot lease at a rate of $2 a square foot in 2016. Excellent location, good access, loading, etc. Certainly on the low side. We're not asking for $2 a square foot. 1093 Sherwin, pardon me. 2016 lease for 175,000 square feet in that north St. James area, just off of Route 90, $2.95 a square foot, 19-foot ceiling height there across the board. So with a property built in 1964, what I will point out, if you go down my chart to number 9, we also have 1093 Sherwin, 2013 lease at $2.75 a square foot for 175,000 square feet. So we're seeing a 20-cent lift in that particular tenancy over that span of time, and they're paying $2.95 in 2016. Will that have bumped marginally since that time? Certainly it will have, but probably going to follow the same pattern. 1750 Inkster, excellent property. Also in the assessor's brief, I believe, 2014 lease, so just over 100,000 square feet at $3.12 a square foot. Certainly superior, 22 feet across the board in terms of exterior wall height. Excellent loading capacity on the frontage and greater site area, better land to plan area. One on Sargent, 1725, 770 Pandora. This is an interesting one. So it's the same ownership group, the DeFair family. They have another manufacturing facility at 770 Pandora. They have one of the buildings, the most modern one, that they've been leasing space out in for a period of time. They don't demise the spaces and they rent them out on a gross basis. So 107,000 square foot lease there in 2017 with a net of $1.64 per square foot. Now, again, they're not demising these or providing additional loading doors or anything of that nature. So the rent is certainly on the low side, and we're not asking for $1.64. But it is certainly a superior building. 630 Kernahan. This is out in that Transcona area as well. We have 2 leases there, 2013, $2.86 net and $3.55 for 61,000 and 108,000 square feet. 26-foot wall height. This is a distribution warehouse, was designed as such. It has since been multi-tenanted rather than a single occupant as it was originally. There's more there for you. I'm not going to go through each of them. What I will point out at the bottom, 1370 Sony. This is a 2008 starting lease with steps. This is one of the premier industrial warehouse high cube distribution buildings in the city. Sony Place is located in Fort Garry, just off of McGilvery by Waverly. It's a beautiful building, excellent loading, very good finishes, extremely high wall height at 34 feet. And we have a lease there with step at this time at 228,000 plus square feet at $4.22 a square foot. That's an excellent building. So we're not in that range. That is why I included that one. I've probably gone on long enough with regard to description of the building and the challenges of getting a tenant of that size for the subject. So there's further text for you there describing the range of what we're looking at. Bulk of the ranges being between 250 and 350 a square foot. We've assigned a rental rate of $3.50 a square foot to the subject property based on our analysis. Looking at all of those components, we have bumped our rate from $3.15 a square foot in the last cycle. So that gives us our gross rental potential. Move on to the vacancy issue. We've applied the 3% vacancy that the city of Winnipeg has in their model. We've given you the market stats there as well. It is a large single occupant building. They have had some smaller tenancies that they've taken in as their business has shrunk on the front. I have no further detail with regard to those tenancies or the size of the spaces. Typically, they had tenants that would be in for shorter periods of time on month-to-month basis, etc. So, unfortunately, I can't provide you any background on that particular aspect. The property owner has made the decision in 2022 to shut down their operations entirely. So they have a vacant building essentially, which they are not operating out of, both 55 and 125 furniture. Investment vacancy, obviously showing 7+%. We have a fully vacant building. We are recognizing this not within the vacancy that we're applying to the building, but within the cap rates. We've already discussed expense allowance. We can move beyond that to capitalization rate. So let's look at the detail here. Already described the property. We have a single occupant, oversized building that is older with significant portion of lower roofing, etc., lower quality of the structure, difficult internal demising for any potential tenancies, etc. Very few occupants of that size. Lots of costs to change the building to a different format. We have limited loading, limited plan-to-plan area ratio. All of these things have an impact on both your potential number of tenants out there and what they're willing to pay, what your vacancy will be, etc. So let's look at some factors that need to be considered. So we have a special purpose building, limited utility to other users, high capital investment expenses. For a building of this size, think of the overall size of the roof. We have 248,000 square feet divided by 43,560. That's how many acres of roof that have to be maintained. Lots of HVAC costs, oversized property for the market, limited ability to convert to multi-tenancy based on the factors described. Greater vacancy risk for single or very large tenancy, functional obsolescence, physical obsolescence, and then finally, looking at financing a property of this vintage, of this size, that's fully vacant, would be certainly challenging on the market. So let's look at material with regard to capitalization rates. So we have quoted both Colliers and C.B. Richard Ellis, two of the largest commercial brokerages in Canada. And they are giving us ranges of 6% to 6.75% from Colliers and 6% to 7.25% for C.B. Richard Ellis for the appropriate time frame for investment grade industrial assets. Subject property would not fall within that. We have a extremely large single tenant industrial asset. It would not fit within their survey. It would fall outside of those bounds. Beyond that, we have our capitalization rate study is shown at the bottom of the page on 21. Our cap rates here are all properties that traded between 2016 and 2019. They are all arm's length transactions and they're purchased for the income in place. So 700 Mission, the first one, 2019 sale at 7.8%. A little bit of an older property, not as old as a good portion of the subject, but it traded at a cap rate of 7.8%. Single occupant there, 895 Century, multi-tenant property, 2017 sale at 6%, 6.6% rather. This is an excellent property on Route 90. 6.6% cap, 333 debates, 2017 sale for a single tenant property there, 7.4%. Obviously much newer, being in the St. Boniface Industrial Park. 78 Hutchings, also single tenant, 2016 sale at 7.2%, and then multi-tenant sale on Sherwin and Keith at a rate of 7%. Subject property has all of the factors I've described. We've assigned a cap rate of 8.25% based on our analysis as a fair and reasonable estimate. And this is a reduction from the 8.75% used in the City of Winnipeg modeling and our valuation for the 2020 cycle. This was used by the board in the last cycle as well. So our comparison and summary is shown on page number 22. You can see our valuation on the left-hand side of the chart at the top, compared to the City of Winnipeg's 2023 valuation and 2022 valuation. So City of Winnipeg's income has jumped significantly, and they have dropped their capitalization rate for the property by a full percentage point, which we do not see as being appropriate. Our summary gives us a final market value of $9,178,000. This is a jump from the 2020 assessment of $7.8 million. Our addenda includes the income and expense information, a quick news article with regard to the closing of deferred furniture, and then we have the decision from the last cycle confirming the recommendation of the City of Winnipeg at $7.8 million. As well as my valuation for the property, which was marginally under that value. That is my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, we'll start there. Thank you for the long presentation, Trevor. With a presentation like this, there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of things that we'll have to review. So I'll try to be mindful of that, panel members, but there's some contradictions here. So not that I'm going to remember it all, but the last comment you made was you had stated in your opening statement that it was the city of Winnipeg's recommendation, and maybe I'm wrong here, that the city of Winnipeg recommended a value of $7.8 million. And because the initial assessment on 810 is $10,023,000. And I heard you say the city's recommendation was 7.8. Is that true?
Sorry, thank you for bringing that up. And this is not an intent to mislead here. I misread my fuzzy brief here. The decision of the board was, as stated on my A10, based on our evidence as well as the city's evidence. So thank you for catching me on that and correcting that. Again, my apologies for that.
And do you know whose appeal it is in 2020 at the municipal board?
Do I know whose appeal it is?
Who appealed the property for 2020 at the municipal board? Did you appeal it or did we appeal it?
I don't recall at the moment, but
It's a city of Winnipeg appeal,
okay.
which would indicate that we weren't happy with the $7.8 million cut.
Yeah, that's fine. And again, my apologies. It was not an intent to mislead. I had thought originally that it was a recommendation, but that was one of the other properties.
Okay, no problem, because my cheat sheet is so long here. So you had mentioned at times, this was only one economic unit and there's no potential for any subdivision. But, and then you'd also said because there's no potential for subdivision, in my presentation, and then even in your presentation, you said, well, the tenants there are only month to month. Well, there's a tenant called Alliance Store since 2013 that's never been reported on the mailers, and they're occupying 46,000 square feet. So my first question is, why hasn't it been listed on the mailer? It sort of contradicts your theory that this property is not eligible to be multi-tenanted, and they are using 46,000 square feet. So in a nutshell, you could all answer that at one time, but it's just, you say it can't be developed, yet there's been tenants there since 2013 occupying 46,000 square feet.
Okay, happy to address that. So just to start with, I didn't say that it can't be redeveloped into multiple tenancies. What I said is it will be very challenging in order to do so based on the structure itself, the layout, the cost that would be involved to do this. And then what is your resultant market for a space that has, 14, 16 foot ceiling height for a goodly portion of the building? The tenancies that you're referring to, and I can't comment with regard to what the ownership has included on their income and expense form, as I don't complete that for them or give them any guidance on that. I expect that they will complete it to their best of their abilities. If they don't include information on it, I don't have access to that. That in the past, they have had tenancies on short-term basis at the front of the building. So along Gateway where the loading would be, as you described earlier. I'm assuming that is probably where these tenancies that you're discussing are. I have no further background with regard to those. I'm afraid if I did, I would provide it to you and we could run through that. So my comments are with regard to the information that I had available to me and my understanding of what the owners had done with any vacant space that they had when they weren't using space over time. So I gather that must have changed marginally on the front portion of that building, which I believe is the portion that has the better loading. So that would be where they would be located.
So with that being said, you said these typical tenancies have been short-term, month to month. Is 9 years a short period of time?
Well, Mirek, I know you're doing your job here, but I have no information on those.
Okay, But from my opinion, you're representing the owner's best interest. For me to do my job effectively and for me to protect the taxpayers of the city of Winnipeg, I need good information. Without good information, I don't get good results, and I don't create good market values.
Understood. And from my point of view, yes, that I also need the good information. Unfortunately, I don't have anything further to provide you.
So for the employees that work on the western portion of the building, do you know where they park? Because obviously in the pictures that you're showing here, there's not a lot of areas for parking, right? And because the entire street is called Furniture Park, would employees not have the abilities to park on the other side, on the south portion of Furniture Park?
No. So there,
No?
well, hold on. And
I did work there, Trevor.
if you're trying to catch me on particular,
I'm just asking a question.
trying to speak to any internal rental parking situation that they may have created with a sister corporation on the other side of the street. Now, and sister corporation is actually too strong. There was a division in the company and family back in the 2000s with Palliser. They had Olive Furniture Park, so both the south and the north side. At that time, the split was such that DeFair Furniture took control of 25, or rather 55 and 125 furniture. The south part of the property is Palliser, an entirely separate entity, really has nothing to do with the north side. So they're not connected in that way. If there is any parking that they do there, I imagine it would be on a commercial basis where they lease space out. I know that on site, and again, we're valuing the property for itself, not, can they rent space nearby? There's very limited parking on site here. So you may have parked on the south side, but that may be prior to the division as well.
Okay, so for the employees that did work there, or the employees that work at Alliance and at Salvation Army, we can see that there's limited parking. But on Furniture Park, can anyone go down Furniture Park, or is there some sort of security system there?
There is a security system. It is gated at the front.
Okay, and so the people who have access to that would be able to, utilize the parking on the south side if they were working on the north side. Is that a fair comment to make?
No, it's not a fair comment. That is not their property.
Oh, I understand they're not that property, but they are brothers here, right? And there's a division of assets.
I'm trying to be circumspect here, I guess. And from what I understand, there's no relation whatsoever between the two sides. There's no familial closeness where they share space, etc. It simply is not there. There was a reason for the split. I don't know it, and I'm not going to get into that.
So I'm going to reference to page 17 now of Mr. Smith's brief for the panel members. So have market rents generally gone up since in the past 5 years, or have they gone down in the past 5 years with regards to the comparables that you've presented here today?
Well, those are two different things. Market rents in general for the industrial market have risen, yes, but that's what we're looking at here is what appropriate rates are for the subject property.
Okay, and so with that being said, are there any other leases that you could have used at 1821 Wellington Avenue that you have access to?
Not that I have access to.
Okay, are you aware that Bison Transport leases space in 1821 Wellington?
I know they're there, but I do not have any information on their tenancy.
Okay, so for the record, I had used that as a comparable. What Mr. Smith is saying is correct. The $2 is reflective, and that's part of the parking aspect of it. But there's also Bison Transport has leasable space there, and they're paying north of $5 on a similar square foot area. Next thing here, 1750 Inkster Boulevard. You're using a reference of 2014. Are you current, or do you know what's on the current mailer for that space in 2020?
No, Mr. Verleek, if I had the information from 2020, I would have provided the updated version for you.
Okay, so for the record, I have the 2020 mailer here, one owner occupied space. The rent's currently at, just give me 1 sec here, $6.25.
And is that for the same 102,000 square foot?
Well, because there was a step up lease there at different periods of time. And so the first lease was at 134, then they expanded their space another 46,000 square feet. And it's, well, and that aspect of it is $5.50. Because the other aspect that I was looking at was an older lease where that they're no longer there, that they vacated. So the entire space, so for the record, I have 173,000 square feet at $5.50.
And what's the year on that, Merrick?
2020.
So the space has been changed and expanded, and I would imagine there's been investment in it. Did you indicate that it was owner occupied space?
No, it's an artist lease.
Hmm.
And so and I'm looking at it right now. Next question. With regards, well, you know, I want to make this quick, so I'll just focus on two other things. Do you know you're referencing a 2015 lease on 1450 Mountain Avenue? Do you know what the current lease is on that area?
And I think we have a good professional relationship here. If I had that information, I would.
Okay. So I have the mailer in front of me right here. It's at $6.90. Last question with regards to leases.
That same space, Mr. Furley?
That is on 140. Just wait, let me just double check here. It is.
So it's likely unit then.
It is. What ends up happening here? It was on 81,000 square feet.
So that's likely a different unit then, correct?
Canada Goose. Unit 3A.
Yeah, I don't have all of my information.
Okay. That's fine. So my last question on rents, 1370 Sony Place. I am mindful of the improvements that have taken place here. So, and you don't have a date on the lease here. Do you know what you said you don't know, but I want to share with the board that the current lease for 228,484 square feet is $6.33.
Okay, that's good to know.
So this way you can make reference of that. And I do have that information right here in front of me if the panel members need to see that.
That's great. So what I had actually said was that the lease starts in 2008 and that it would step up from that time, obviously. So
$6.33 is significantly higher than $4.22. Is that a fair comment to make?
It is a fair comment to make, and to expand upon that, the reason that I supplied the 1370 in the first place is the premier nature of that building and the premium rents that would be achieved on such a property. So they're generating $6.33 a square foot for that doesn't surprise me.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that information's there. Can you tell me how you came up with your cap rate information?
You guys talk one at a time.
I
Sorry,
can.
I apologize.
You were still answering your question, okay, Merrick?
The 1370 Sony Place again was to give an indicator of what the peak of the market is showing. So the updated information is certainly useful, but again, it's provided not in an apples to apples situation where I consider them similar. I really don't. This is a premier IQ, far better located property that will drive rates that will be well beyond what one would ever achieve at the subject property.
And I'm mindful of that. I'm just questioning if the premium would be almost $3.
I would think so, yes.
Okay. Tell me about the research that you did on 700 Mission Street. I'm looking at page 21 with regards to your cap rate study on the 700 Mission. Do you have any details, or do you remember any details offhand?
I do not remember the specific details with regard to the investigation of that one. It was done obviously within my prior firm, and we did look at whatever information was available to us on that sale.
Did you have access to the sales mailer from that?
The sales mailer that they
Yeah,
sent.
so you included in your cap rate study. So when you worked at your previous agency, did they have some documentation showing, or was a document created that showed a 7.8% cap rate?
The capitalization rate was developed on the information from the property at the time of sale, including the income and expense at the time. Do we have access to the sales mailer that they send into the city? No, we don't.
Did you have access to the appraisal report that was done on this property and the sales listing?
I'm not quite sure where we're going with this.
Well, okay, so I'll make it short, Marcel, and I won't ask any more questions. On the documentation that we have received, there was a sales listing for this property at $2.8 million. There was an appraisal report for this property. There was financing of this property that was all financed. And the cap rate that was used for financing is 6.1%, which is significantly lower than what's been presented here by the applicant.
So you're speaking about two different things here, if I may. So you're talking about an appraisal report that I haven't seen that was prepared for financing of that purchase, I presume. And in that report, you're saying that they used a 6.1% cap, and yet
the information that they've provided us.
Still talking.
And yet the information on the existing income expense shows a cap rate of 7.8%. So that's easily explainable. The cap rate is what it is. That's what it was purchased at. What the appraisal consultant uses in their financing appraisal as far as the cap rate goes is not based on what that one traded. I don't know what they've done, but their cap rate of 6.1% is their professional opinion of whatever the future of that property is going to be. I don't know if they were putting in a tenant at a higher lease rate or what the situation was.
Okay,
So
just to confirm, when RBC loaned out $2.85 million for this property, you're telling me the Royal Bank of Canada would not look at the income producing-ness of the property or the cap rate that was used for that sale?
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. You're asking me to comment upon an appraisal consultant's document that I haven't seen, and speculating that a bank wouldn't do their due diligence. Of course they would. That's the job. And no, they wouldn't lend $2,850,000 on a $2,850,000 sale.
Just so you fully understand me, I didn't have access to the appraisal report. I'm using the sales mailer, and the sales mailer showing a 6.1% cap rate, which is significantly lower than what you're presenting here. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Hey, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Ian?
I have a general question with respect to, there's been a lot of talk about 125 and 55 Furniture Park. Has there been either an application to subdivide to reflect the reality of the role, or has there been an application to amend the assessment role?
I don't know that they have officially applied to amend the assessment role to be one roll number. I have pointed it out to the ownership in the past, and I guess they have not taken it further to create a single role. Why it was broken into two, I don't know. It's all still on a single title.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But Trevor, because you deal with the ownership group more than I do, wasn't there a request by the brothers to separate the businesses? And that's why you have the fair division on the one side and Palliser Furniture on the other.
Well, yes, but the 25 and 125 are all on a single title on a single side of the road.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
I'm on your cap rate.
Mhm.
Now I might have misunderstood you, but when you said the cap rate was set at
8.75.
8.75, that's what you're setting it at now?
No.
Or you went to
Not at all.
8.25?
If you look at my page 22, I'm using 8.25%.
Yeah.
And also on that page, you see the summary of city in 2023 and 2020. So they used 8.75 in the prior cycle and dropped it a full percentage point.
But when you stated the 8.25,
Mhm.
you said because of the building being vacated in 2022.
No, not,
You said that was
Not just
affecting
that.
it, but you said it was affecting it.
well,
So if it wasn't being for sale, how would that number round it out?
let me understand your question better, I guess.
Okay, you stated
Yeah.
that it was, the cap rate was being affected by the thing being sold, everybody being laid off in 2022. For 2022. You said it had an effect on the cap rate,
Well,
but we can't take post information.
no, you can't, absolutely. And I agree with that. So that, it's a small, you can ignore that for all intents and purposes. The discussion that I've gone through here extensively on the factors of this building impacting cap rates and tenancy, et cetera, would drive a cap rate of 8.25%. The vacancy, 100% vacancy issue that we're talking about, yes, that's after the fact. I agree with you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to right next door, 125. You guys want a break before we go on, or you want to just go through?
I'm good, whatever is, good with everybody.
I'm checking.
Uh,
Everybody, you good? Good.
I'm good too, because in fairness, guys, because panel members is that because these properties are so interconnected, a lot of the questions are redundant, so there won't be any questions on leases or cap rates or anything like that.
I've heard that before.
Well, you know what? I stand by my word, and if you want to put the timer out for me, I'm open to the timer.
All right, I like that. The timer
The property
comes,
that we're looking at here is 55 Furniture Park,
bring it up.
Sorry, Mark.
22-220. Roll number 04002872 000. The value for this property you have is $12,260,000. 1963 to 86 built. Wall heights are between 14 and 25 feet. The land area that we have is 378,284, and the leasable area.
Merrick, can I stop you for a second?
That's 125. That's,
Yeah,
that's 55. I need 125. I'm sorry.
Like
Like I said, these properties are so interconnected, and I'm tired.
You went any further because you're on the wrong property.
So I'm good now. I'm good now. 22-221. Roll number 04002875 125 Furniture Park. We have assessed value of $10,599,000. This building was built between 1982 and 1999. There's 3 buildings here. Wall heights are between 10 and 24 feet. We have a land area of 300,694, and we have a leasable area of 215,030. This property is at the municipal board in 2018 and 2020. It is our appeal in 2020, just for the record to be stated. And so when it's referenced that the assessment was this that is not the case. On page 2, you'll see 125 Furniture Park, where it's located at. It's all similar to this. And what's interesting about this property is that, you know, there is good access. Well, land to building ratio may be an issue, the bottom line is they went through an expansion in 1999. So if they did an expansion in 1999 for the space, you know, that would have affected the land to building ratio. So there's good access points. And so when we talk about land to building ratios on the top of page 3, you know, there is a fair amount of space there with regards to trucks and everything like that. And also at the time they were trying to using a modified just-in-time inventory system, because what would end up happening is that the trucks would pick up products. And bear in mind, this is from 25 years ago. Everything would get picked up at 125 Furniture Park and be moved to 630 Kernahan. And that's where everything would get staged and sent out to all the different retailers across North America. But there's always, you know, but there were some direct shipments that end up taking place out of 125 Furniture Park. Trevor had mentioned this and I had mentioned this. So what had happened is, because I'd worked at Palliser Furniture at one point, I know people who have worked there. I'm sort of invested in it because I know the history, I know some of the people there. So in the springtime of this year, they had industrial office space for lease available. And so even though it's post reference, I'm including some of the pictures of the space, and it's also highlighted in Trevor's picture here. I've blocked out the rental rates for the property on page 4, but let me state they are significantly higher than what Mr. Smith is advertising today. And I cannot understate this. They are higher. And so, and the challenges that we have as a department is because there's so many owner occupied properties, there's not a lot of leases in place that are, you know, in the 200,000 square foot range. So with that being said, I got some pictures on page 5. So there's the site plan that's laid out there. And there's some differences with regards to the office space, the warehouse space. I'm very familiar with this area here right now in terms of the manufacturing, you know, like on the second floor. So they had offices on the first floor, and on the second floor, that's where they had a training session to teach their employees about quality assurance. And that was my background in the previous life. And you can sort of see on the bottom of page 5, that was like a classroom that I was teaching. It was a continued dedication, like they were ISO 9001 certified, so I'm familiar with the plant. Similar to the subject property, they are stating that there's a gross rent place in here for $595,000, which would make it $150, not reflective of actuals. But in fairness, the property owners have provided us something in income and expense mailers. What we have right here is we have one space. We have a small space for office at 913, but the majority of space is at $3.95. It is a newer building, so subsequently, that's why this rent is a bit higher than the previous rent. But that's what we have here. Utilizing 3% vacancy, effective gross income of $828,712. We come up with a net operating income of $779,015. We have a cap rate of 7.35%, which is how we came across the $10,599,000. What I've done here in terms of leases, they're all similar to what we had used before, so we cannot talk about that. We've already discussed that thoroughly, and I have no other information to present.
Trevor, questions?
4 minutes.
Whoa, that's a record.
So I guess my main commentary is that you've referenced post-reference material, correct? As you've stated on pages number 4.
What I've done is
Wait till he's
in
done there.
2022. So that was from this year, correct? 2022?
the listings from this year, but
Yeah.
based on my experience of working here, the property looks very similar to what it looked like in 2002 when I last worked there. And I've excluded the rental rate that was listed for the subject property.
So,
But everything else would be right on schedule.
So you've presented the post-reference material and inferred that the rental rate was considerably higher based on a situation that's post-reference, correct?
What I'm saying here right now is that this is an indication of market value with regards to market rents being looked at for it. I'm referencing it here because right now, because as you said, The property is completely vacated. So, and as I argued with the previous property, smaller spaces rent for higher amounts of money. My evidence shows that. We haven't been provided that by you or the owner, but there's a correlation between space and market rents. And so this building does have the potential to be subdivided. And subsequently, the other portion of the building, which is very similar to this portion, has been subdivided. So anything's possible.
So let's deal with that then. Being very familiar with the building, has this building been subdivided now, or is it one large open span space?
Well, based on my research and talking with the property owners, or I've learned that in 2023, this portion of the building will be fully occupied in a subdivided manner.
Even talking about 2023, like what we have an assessment system.
We're looking at the market potential for the income of this property. So just because, I'll let you go, I'll let you speak, sorry.
Assessment, that's completely irrelevant.
Correct.
Mr. Smith, are you familiar with the term called highest and best use?
Of course I am.
Okay, so if the nature of the building changes, then you look at another nature of the building, and then would you not look at the highest and best use of the building moving forward?
No, is the building demised into any more than a single open span space?
Well, the previous building has been demised into different spaces, and what will end up happening here, there's currently a permit taken out for this property right now with regards to moving forward.
Now in 2022. Okay, those are all of my questions.
But what we're doing is we're looking at the physical space as of January 1st, 2023. We're looking at the market value conditions as of April 1st, 2020. But we are looking at the physical space of the property. It's just like if we were looking at a residential home. If a residential home built a 2-car garage on January 1st, 2023, we would add the value of that 2-car garage to our property. This property will be changing, and we're looking at the physical nature of it. And when we see the mailers in 2023 or next year or moving forward, that'll be indication of. But what I'm saying here is I'm not chasing a higher rent that I've referenced, but I'm not looking at your rent that you're saying either.
Okay, Faye, do you have any questions? Are you
No
sure?
question, thank you.
Ian?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, on with your presentation, sir.
Great, thank you. So and I'm not going to carry on at any length with regard to that, but the assessment system is structured as it is for a reason. Any change in the building that happens after the fact is captured in the appropriate time frame, which is the next assessment. We're not looking at a building that's demised. We don't speculate what it might become. It is what it is. So let's look at 125 Furniture Park. All of my same commentary with regard to the buildings being adjoined in a single title and should be assessed as a single unit remain the same. I'm not going to cover that ground twice. This is the newer portion of the building, having been built between 1982 and 1989. The cover photo shows you an aerial of the property. It is on the east end of Furniture Park, so furthest away from Gateway. You can see the layout of the building. There again, we're facing south. Furniture Park goes east to west towards the top end of that photo. Pardon me. And you can see the layout on site there. Interestingly, there's a small corner of that site that is not theirs, with a different building on it. So you can see the angle of the building that creates. Anyway, let's move into the valuation. Page number 3, bit of background. We're looking at a jump from 7.9 million to 10,599,000. Yes, the 7.9 has been appealed by the City of Winnipeg, but that is the 2020 assessment as designated by the Board of Revision. In my brief, we also have that decision towards the end of my documentation starting on page A10, I believe. So you can see again, the appeal history for the subject property stretching back. It's still under appeal for 2018 by the ownership. And again, self-explanatory information there for you to see if you wish. 6.9 acre site, land to plan area ratio of 1.39 to 1. So we do have the same issue with regard to any on-site storage space, any on-site parking access. They do have somewhat better loading, as you can see in the cover photo, loading at the rear of the property there with the trucks and dock level loading, of course, in that space. However, it is convoluted. You come in down Furniture Park, a locked roadway around the building, make the corner around the back to the loading court. Not optimal from the majority of tenants' point of view. So all of my text on 3 and 4 remains the same. We can get into the photos on pages 5 onwards. So exteriors from the front and the side. Then we have one of the loading courts at the rear on page 6 and another exterior on 6, as well as some on page 7 with a portion of the building. If you look at let's move into the interiors. It's more instructive. Page number 8 and 9. This is the interior of 125 Furniture. It is a wide open span, with the exception of whatever office space we're discussing there. It's a single entity. We're not looking at smaller individual units. We have a 215,000 square foot leasable area adjoined to another 263,000 square feet. In a single accessible unit. The improvements are shown on page number 10. I won't run through those in detail. Most of the wall height is 24 feet at this particular property, with some of it being 18 foot, but by and large, it's 24 foot. Page 11 gives you the site with the aerial views. So again, just to orient you, top photo, we're on the right-hand side of it. It's the, well, oddly shaped warehouse portion with a zoom in at the bottom of the page. Location, same exact location as the last one. Let's not cover the individual components regarding valuation considerations for large single tenant properties on pages 14, 15. Our lease comparables do remain the same on page number 16. We've covered those in detail. My comments remain the same. This is somewhat newer, somewhat superior building to the prior one, obviously. And we have increased our rental rate accordingly to $3.75 a square foot based on the market information available in our review. Moving on, the expense allowance remains the same, as well as the vacancy, which we've discussed, and shortfall. I will point out, typically with a building of this size and the previous one, you'll have significantly greater operating expenses related to maintenance of everything, roof, structure of that size, HVAC requirements, just repair in general. It will drive a typically higher operating expense. We're not asking for more. We're accepting the 385. And our capitalization rate commentary again remains the same. There are exceptionally few tenants of this size in the marketplace. We don't have a multi-tenant building. That's not what we're assessing. We have a multi-unit building. We have a single span of 215,000 square feet. What tenants are out there for a space of that size, and what will they pay? According to our information, we believe they'd be at about $375 a square foot. Now, if we look at my page 21, we have a summary of our valuation. And you can see our valuation in comparison to the city of Winnipeg's 2023 and 2020 valuation. We are at $3.75 a square foot for the property, close to what the city was at, which I believe was 380 something, 381. By 395, so marginal difference there. And looking at the subject property again, really what we have is 480,000 square foot building, or whatever the final number is, as a single entity. It's on one title, it's not on two. This would have to be demised off and subdivided in order to achieve that, which again is not what we're assessing. We have lowered the cap rate to 8%, and using our net income based on this discussion, this gives us a final market value of $8,782,000. This is a significant jump from the $7.9 million for the 2020 assessment decided by the board. And our addendum materials include the income expense, as well as the 2020 decision on page number A10 and 11, where the value was arrived at was 7.9 million, with our value of the property being somewhat lower than that. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't believe that was 4 minutes, but for me, that was pretty good.
For you, it
And in fairness to Trevor, that was pretty good. I'll just give me 1 sec here. I got to make sure. You had mentioned parking again, Trevor. Are you familiar with regards to more so the south side of the furniture park? And you can see it on 125 as well. Are you aware that there's parking available through an arrangement with regards to Manitoba Hydro to the eastern portion of the subject property?
So that would be off-site, is that correct?
Well, it'd be off-site, but it's access to, because there's a lot of cars parked there on these portions here. And so whoever the new tenant would be moving forward, would they not have access to that same parking that's currently in place?
Well, I guess my comments on that are well, so what the current owners are doing is leasing space off of an adjacent property for parking, I gather. And would that be available to in the future? Certainly it may be, but again, it's not on site. So the parking is an additional cost to any potential occupant, tenant, purchaser of the property.
But would that alleviate some of the parking issues that you're making reference to with the land to building ratio?
Well, at a cost, yes, but it doesn't change the physical nature of the property.
And so, so you agree with me that there is potential for other developments moving forward for this property at 125 Furniture Park?
I don't follow your question.
Well, because if 55 Furniture Park has been able to be subdivided, could not the same be possible at 125 Furniture Park?
Well, so anything is possible, and certainly could one make changes to a building as it currently exists? Yes, you could. I discussed that in my original presentation on 55 regarding the challenges with that and the significant costs that one would go through. But again, that's not the property that we're dealing with. That's
for sure. And I understand that. It's just that, there's a lot of similarities between the two properties. And so if a business has been operating for over 9 years, in one capacity, the same potential could happen on the other side of the building. Is that a fair comment to make?
if you're saying, could they put other tenants in the other end of the building? It's really the same comments that I just made, I guess.
No other questions. That's fine. We're all tired.
I was looking at the end of the table. Faye?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Faye. Ian?
None for me, thank you.
And I'm good as well. That concludes the meeting, gentlemen.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Well, I'm not done yet. We have
Have a good day.
scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned.